I'm Dr Madsen Pirie, President of the Adam Smith Institute. Welcome to our series, Economics for the Real World. There is a continuing debate between those who favour low taxation because it allows people to spend money on their priorities, and those who favour high taxation because it brings in money that can be spent on public services such as roads, education and healthcare. In a democracy, the balance between those conflicting views is usually determined by what people vote for. What they might say in their express preferences is that they support tax increases, but what they do in their revealed preferences is quite often to oppose parties that threaten to impose them. Similarly, while they might say that taxes are too high, they often oppose parties that allow roads, schools and hospitals to degrade in quality through insufficient funding. Democracy sets the balance. There are limits to how much taxation people will tolerate before they resort to ways of escaping it. If they think taxes are unfairly high, they employ accountants and tax shelters to reduce them. And if high taxes make work less worthwhile, they do less of it. Both of these effects act to reduce the revenue that higher taxes might otherwise yield. In the 1970s, the economist Arthur Laffer produced a diagram to illustrate this point. The horizontal axis shows the tax rate, and the vertical axis shows the revenue raised at that level. Obviously, if the tax rate is 0%, then the revenue yielded will be zero. At the other end, if the tax rate is 100%, the revenue will also be zero. It says there'll be no point in anyone working if they gain nothing from it. Between the 2 points, there will be a curve that shows the revenue yielded at different tax levels. And since it goes up from 0 at 0%, descends again to 0 to 100%, we can have a rough idea of the shape of the curve that goes up as tax levels rise and then down again as they rise beyond a certain level. This is the famous Laffer curve. The curve will have a maximum point. That sets limits on how far governments can go in putting up taxes without losing revenue as a result. It is not the case that there is a fixed maximum that holds for different countries and different starting tax rates. On the contrary, the maximum point on the Laffer curve will vary with the culture of a tax jurisdiction and with what the current top tax rate is. In the UK, for example, if the current top rate is 45%, it is highly likely that less revenue would be yielded by an increase to 50%, and likely that more revenue would be brought in by reduction to perhaps 38%. If such a reduction were made, however, then when it settled in, the new top rate of 38% would move the maximum point on the Laffer curve downwards. There is another advantage to lowering the top tax rate down to the Laffer curve maximum. Not only does it yield more revenue, it also increases the proportion of tax that is paid by the rich. As they are motivated to do extra work and to do away with tax shelters, they end up paying the new lower rate on a much larger income. When the UK income tax rates came down in the 1980s, the share paid by the top 10% of earners went up from 35% of the total to 48%. That is, from just over a third of the total to just under a half. This accords with the fairness principle, which suggests that those with the most money should pay most of the taxes. But the Laffer curve says it can be done by lowering the top tax rate rather than by increasing them.